Welcome. I'm here with my sister Kris.
Hi.
Kris.
Hello again.
from Cardvoyant Kris. And we're just going to be talking about a few topics, a couple that actually I got emails about. So I thought they might be interesting topics to kind of talk about. I think people are curious about these things. So I thought we could talk first about there's been a lot of stuff about like kind of doomsday kind of stuff out of like revelations in the Bible, these are the last days and or the second coming. I think a lot of people think that the evangelicals are kind of still supporting like Trump and Pence and the way they're not handling the virus because it's pushing them towards a second coming or like the end times or whatever. So what are your thoughts about that, Kris? What do you think?
Well, I've read a lot about that, about this idea of sort of pushing forth things to make Armageddon take place. There's a couple people that I follow on Twitter that are actually historians and like political scientists that have talked a lot about that because apparently it's a real thing.
Right.
But just in general, even beyond that, I think there are so many people that see this culmination of so many things happening at once. And that's what comes to mind is these are the last days. This is the, precursor to the second coming. I mean, we have that within our own family, because it is something that we grew up with, this idea that the second coming was imminent, that we were living in the last days. And now with everything that's happening, how can your thinking sort of not go that way if you believe that kind of thing? So I can't imagine how frightening it is for some people, or maybe some people welcome it. I'm sure some people, are thinking that here we go, into better times or something. But the whole thing is just so, there's just so many things happening that I think that naturally you think something is going on here. We talk about that.
Right. And do you think, well, I mean, we heard that a lot, like you said, growing up, just in our family, and not necessarily really in our religion necessarily, but definitely the family would say like, these are the end times of the last days. I heard that a lot.
But it was very much in the 70s in particular, for whatever reason. There was a lot of that going on, and in the church itself. There was this whole saying that was familiar, was that we were in the Saturday evening of time, and Sunday was the second coming. Do you remember that?
Okay, right.
So
I don't, but I believe it.
but it was just so prevalent, and it just felt so imminent. So many people expected it at the year 2000. But this seems even more like realistic, I think, to some people than then.
Well, there's a plague, and there's
yeah, there's a plague. There's crazy downfall of the republic almost.
But you have to say, the hanging by a thread, the republic would hang by a thread or
there's
whatever.
All these protests and these, this sort of social unrest.
Right.
And then there's these little things like murder hornets or whatever those were. And then like the locusts and the dust clouds and all these different, there's so many things. So I'm sure it's scary for people.
And I think it's unsettling. I think that and to be clear, we don't think these are the end times. We're just saying that this is just, but we can understand why people would think that, and we're hoping to kind of put that to rest, because basically, and I want to blow your mind with something that Eckhart Tolle said, but I just thought, when his ideas of and his translation of the Bible and or his interpretation of the Bible and Christ's teachings are my favorite by far. I completely resonate with them. And one thing he talks about is in the beginning of the Bible, he talks about the fact that when Adam and Eve, had the fall
Mm-hmm.
from thing, that it's actually the beginning of thought, when humans started to think and
Oh, I
ponder.
like that.
And that's kind of the beginning, because before then they were more like animals. They were kind of just surviving and catching food and whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
and then they started to like realize their own self, like ponder things. What am I doing here? Why is this here? Why, starting to actually think. And that's like the start of the mind. And then he talks about us, that kind of being an evolution, an evolution of humanity. And that's what Genesis is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then Revelations is kind of talking about the new earth, what he calls the new earth. And that's kind of this shift in consciousness, where we're actually going beyond the mind and going kind of back to spirit, where we're very connected to our own spirit, and where we become the observer. We're more of aware of our own thoughts, not as connected to our physical selves. We're aware that this is kind of that this is the matrix. We're kind of aware of it. We're aware of
Right.
our own thoughts. We're aware of our own the fact that this is one lifetime. We're just more aware of that kind of stuff. So, and that's what he thinks Revelations is talking about, is kind of this shift in consciousness, and some will be left behind. And when he talks about the fire and all that stuff, it's being left with your own thoughts, being left in the mind, being left in the mind state.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, some will move on, kind of evolve into a new consciousness, and the others will kind of be left to be in this kind of the prison of the mind, basically. What do you think about that? Yeah,
I think that's really interesting and pretty. It sounds just about right to me. One of the things that I really think is true, and is what's part of what he's talking about, is that so much of the Bible and so many other things in life, like dreams, and sometimes like the visions or the things that you get when you're reading tarot or something like that, they're so symbolic. And I used to think that was almost like unfair. Like, why would just tell us, why all this involved symbolism? But one thing about, not to, you go back to Eckhart Tolle, and I tend to go back to the Seth books, but this is the Seth book that I'm reading right now.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 volumes Seth, but when he's talking about dreams, one of the things he says in the dream state, and I think this is probably true even in any kind of sort of altered state, is that you go into realms that sometimes your physical mind can't quite comprehend. Like, it's a lot to put together. And because we're in a time-space mode, we relate to those things, and we can't relate to some of these bigger things or understand them or take them in. And so many things come to us symbolically because we get that. But it does take some like doing and some work to understand that. And like Eckhart Tolle is so much that person, where he's put in that work, and he's because so much you can receive like through meditation or through those kinds of things, but you have to open your mind to it. And I think that's a problem when you have a physical book like the Bible, or somebody relating a story, that you just sort of take it at face value, and you don't spend the time or even think of relating this to to symbols and symbolism, and trying to break it down that way. I mean, we're very literal physical beings right now, and so I think way too often we take things at face value and in the most simplistic of terms. And so I think that's probably really true. And that's part of the problem when we're talking about end times and things like that, because that's also sort of a physical construct where we expect things at some point to end. And, there may be a time when we sort of don't use the physical earth in the way that we do now, but I don't think it's necessarily a matter of an inevitable ending or destruction or end times or anything like that. It just, I feel so badly sometimes, especially with people like in the family that I know worry about these things. And I can't,
Right.
I don't know how to convey to them that that's not the worry here. You know, the
Right.
worry is us sort of stepping up to the plate and doing what we can to enhance and save our planet, you know, in the ways that we're talking about, you know, productivity and doing the right thing. So I mean, I think that's very true, but it's hard to sort of do that work to get past the very obvious and sort of look beyond. But everything that we do, that's sort of the work that we do is trying to look behind, and that's what so many people
Right.
are trying to do now is look beyond.
And I think, the symbolism is there too. It's written in a symbolic way because symbolism is, for the person reading it, it's to their level, whatever their level is. So they
Right,
might grasp some of the symbolism, or they might take it at face value because they're just not there yet. They're
right,
not
exactly.
able to see levels or layers, which
Mhm.
is fine. That's just not where they're at yet.
Uh,
They're in a different learning stage.
right,
But then you can also, depending on your understanding of things, or as you learn, it becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. I have never heard the things that Eckhart Tolle has said about, and to be honest, if he had told me that, or if I'd read that 4 years ago, I wouldn't have gotten it. I don't think I would have understood it quite the same way. But as you kind of get to know not only kind of your own experiences, but you hear other experiences, and then you read, and then if you do readings, you get a whole nother kind of layer of experiences, and I think that's all added in. And so symbolism is also to give people the chance to learn at their own pace,
right.
to
I
not,
completely agree. I
yeah,
mean, we probably all had those times when you're like reading something, or maybe it's something you've gone over, or you know, something like a movie that you've seen before, and suddenly you're like older and wiser, and you're like, oh, I get that. I get that reference,
absolutely,
or I get that
yes.
thing. And that's
Or
kind
with
of how
songs,
it is.
with
Yeah.
music,
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing with
Definitely. Yeah.
music. I mean, I
Yeah.
used to, listening to, I've heard, Bridge Over Troubled Water, or I've heard, I Am a Rock a million times, and it didn't mean, it never meant the same thing to me at different ages. As a
Right.
kid, it meant one thing. As a teenager, it meant something else. As an adult, it meant something else. You
And it was
grow
all
with it.
meaningful. It was all
Yes,
meaningful, but you
exactly.
add layers to it.
Right.
I can
There's
remember the
no,
first time
yeah.
I ever picked up Eckhart Tolle, which was in walking through the book aisle in Costco. Where did all my fine shopping? But I remember picking it up and looking at it, like reading like a paragraph or two, and it was just like, it was like I knew all the words, but I didn't
Right.
understand a thing that he
Right.
was saying. And
Right.
I probably didn't pick it up again for maybe 3 or 4, 5 years. And
Right.
then when I did, I'm like, why didn't I get this? But it was
Right.
because I'd had some background to help me with it. And
Exactly.
then it was just like also um, understandable and so like beautiful. But before that, it was just like a jumble of words that I had
Yeah,
no idea.
exactly. And there's no, and when I say that, I don't mean to like say like, oh, they don't understand it yet. I'm not being, I'm not looking down on anyone or anything. I'm just saying
Yeah,
that's the beauty of it, is that it means something at all levels, whether you're just starting to read about religious things, or you kind of move past like the kind of traditional religion, you're into other things. It builds on itself as far as
right.
meaning goes. So I think it's brilliant in that way.
Yes, and I think that's why so many people like Eckhart Tolle, or anybody that you know in the Seth books, or if you read like Gary Zukav or
Mm-hmm.
anybody like that, any of these sort of New Age religious teachers, Marianne Williamson, Sonia Choquette,
Mm-hmm.
none of them will ever say that they're like trying to convert you or bring you over to
Right.
their way of thinking. They
Right.
just present what is truth to them and allow you to, you know, to choose or to study more or to learn more because they understand that we're all
Right.
at different levels, and because you don't understand this stuff, or you're not interested in it, or you know, whatever the case may be, doesn't make you any less of a person or less deserving, or you know, some reason to dismiss you at all. It's, you know, we're all equal and, you know, equally loved. This is just this is just like truth, my truth, the truth as I understand it, and I want to, and I'm presenting it for whoever is ready, as you said, for whoever is ready to hear.
Exactly. And Eckhart Tolle, I know he's said that so many times, because people will say, I'm going to give you your book to so-and-so. And he'll say, if they don't understand it, it's okay. They may put it on a bookshelf, and 10 years later, they might get it down,
Yes.
and it will have meaning for them. But right now it may not. So don't be disappointed, if they're, and it's okay. It's never like, oh, they don't get it. It's always like, it's fine. It's fine. Everybody's doing different things in their lifetime,
Yeah. And I've read for a number of people who will say things like, oh, if my sister or my mother or my brother or whatever knew I was doing this, they'd think I'm crazy, or my family doesn't understand this or whatever. And I just think that's so, I mean, it's brave of them in a way to explore these things, but also it's so kind of them to not like push them to understand. I mean, I would hate for people to like feel like they're scared or embarrassed, but I don't think it's that.
Right.
I think it's that it's something that you feel deeply about, but it is that idea of sort of opening yourself, something that's very close to you, and if somebody's going to ridicule it or judge you for it, you just sort of don't do that. So you continue on your way, and you allow them to continue on their way.
Right. Exactly.
So, and exactly. Which is what we do with, hopefully we do with people who hold religion or certain religions very close to their heart, because they are very deep and sort of tender feelings, and you don't want to trample on those, no matter how you perceive truth.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's all very personal. I think it's very personal to you and your own spiritual growth or your own spirit journey.
Yeah.
Well, good. I think that's good. So Kris, maybe I thought maybe we could do a little bit of a reading. I'll try to get maybe a couple of words from my guides for the people watching, and maybe you could pull a couple of cards for those people who are scared, like this is the end times, everything's going haywire, there's nothing. It's okay. I'm just gonna get a few ideas from my guides, and then you can like do your thing and okay. So what I have is that and I'm just gonna kind of paraphrase what I'm getting, because I'm being shown like an actual like a play from start to finish. They're talking about whenever there's a time of turmoil or things that feel chaotic on the earth. It always feels like nobody's in charge, nothing's in charge, everything's just going haywire. And there's always and I think you've talked about this before, but there's always a striving for balance. So there is something in charge. There's always spiritual laws in place that never change. There's always just like there's physical laws that don't change, that we always have gravity. It's that kind of thing. There's always those spiritual laws that stay in place, and there's always this striving for balance. And there's also this when it comes to balance as far as emotions as well. So when there's lots of fear on the earth, there is kind of an influx of like spirit energy to kind of make people not so afraid. It's almost like there's a constant balance, and it's also this spirit world trying to help us balance all the time. It isn't just the earth. It isn't just the earth balancing itself. They're helping us. They're always helping us to get that balance in whether it's personally in our lives or or on the earth or in nature. There's always kind of a blending of spirit energy and the physical that is constantly at play. And then there's also and a lot of it is through like vibration, because they're showing like things moving, like everything's moving with the vibration. So it's a lot of it is through vibration. The other thing that they want to talk about is the fact that right now, if we're looking at a play, like I said, they showed me a play. It's like we're at the climax of the play. It's the part where you think nothing's going to turn out right. Everything's going to be terrible. That, or I always think Ricky Gervais does really good, like his finales are always like that, where you think, how is this ever going to work out? Everything's all crazy. We're at that point in the play, and they're saying this is right. This is in the time where it's kind of like everything's in upheaval, and then pretty soon, like you said, I think in one of your readings, things will kind of calm down and stop, and there will be a point that we kind of look around at the wreckage, that we heal, and then we start to fix stuff and start to kind of move on and come together for the big number at the end.
For the happy ending,
for the
grand finale.
But it is like that. That's where we are.
Yeah.
And if we were looking at a play or a story, that's where we are. We're at the climax, where everything's just kind of, how could this ever work out? But it will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a very, very similar message here, because I only put down 2 cards because I only felt like I need to. But the first card is this 2 of Swords cards. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is always about choices. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this, especially with these 2 sharp, heavy swords, that we're talking very much about the crossroads. And we're very much at a crossroads right now. Yeah. But I do feel like it leans toward actually like the best of outcomes is kind of what I'm hearing. But the thing is, and this is what I found over and over and over, and I mentioned this last time, but in readings, is that, and anybody who's had a reading for me this last month, they'll be like, oh, she said that to me, but it's because it keeps coming up. It just keeps coming up over and over again about how this is happening on the macro in the world, all these world leaders and these big things and all the various things in nature, like the virus and all those kinds of things. But it's also happening in micro too. In our individual lives, we're being asked to choose. We're being asked to choose, like, what side do we stand on? What do we stand for? What do we want to push forward going forward, right? And it's so interesting because this card has all the water in the background that she sort of has her back to. I mean, the blindfold always talks sometimes, or not always, but I mean, basically what it's talking about is knowledge that you don't have, or knowledge that you're refusing to look at, like facts that you're refusing to look at. So that's, for some of us, we have that feeling of, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. It's scary. So what do we do? You know, what choices do we make? And then for other people, they do know, and they're willfully ignoring facts. You know, we see that like in some of our leaders, but this water, I was going to say in the background, always talks about this psychic connection, exactly what you're talking about. And this feeling, and I think for so many of us, there's a feeling of the greater good and wanting to bring forth the greater good and understanding the equality of everything. As you said, this interplay between all forms of life, but then also the great love and equality between the people of, you know, human species, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like so prominent in this card, so much water, because it talks about how important that connection is. And as we go forward, it just feels heavily weighted toward people choosing sort of their highest selves, choosing these things that are for the highest good, achieving that balance. It just feels like there's, honestly, like the vast majority of people are like, of course, this is the direction we want to move in. Of course, we want to move toward social justice and economic justice and equality and freedom and health, you know, things like health and you know, housing, all these things that allow us to be free. So then you got, and this, I love this one because it's what you were talking about. You get the King of Cups. And, you know, cups are all about love and emotion and caring. And I think this comes across as a king. Again, he's on the water. See that psychic sort of connection, because this is talking about that, that love that comes I think, from the spiritual realm, exactly
Mhm.
what you were saying. Like there's this overwhelming sense of love, and it comes across as a king. So often in these readings I've gotten queen or female figures, because there's so
Mhm.
much of that female energy, I think, along with this. But I think here you get the king, because it's talking about that feeling of protection that you
Right.
associate like with the father figure or something like that. And that's how it wants to come across, this feeling. That's kind of what they want us to know from that side, is that we're always they always walk hand in hand with us. They
Mhm.
always do things, if we'll just listen and pay attention, that attempt to protect and guide us. It's very, like you said, it's very hands-on.
Mhm.
So many people unfortunately don't recognize it, or it's hard. You get
Yeah.
caught up in the world and stuff like that. But it's very hands-on. It's you mentioned in the video, your video today, about there are so many people working in this field who are really good,
Yeah.
who are psychics and mediums and tarot readers and all these different things, astrologers, people that are really they have many different tools, but it's all based on their like deep intuition. And
Right.
I think that it's so prevalent now. There have been people like this all through history, but there's so many now. I mean, per capita, maybe it makes sense, there's so many more
Right.
people, but there's
Right.
so many that are prevalent, and we have the ability to do things like this, where you can just sort of
Right.
get it out to people, because it's necessary, and because they
Right.
want um, the other side, the non-physical world wants us to know
Right.
that not only are they with us, but they're helping us bring about this change that is
Right.
going to allow us to sort of progress and grow exponentially as that veil is thinned, and we have a closer contact continually with
Right. It's
with the
time.
spirit world. It
It's
is.
time. It's time for it to happen. So, like you said, so many more people can be reached. There's all different kinds of voices, and yet they're all kind of saying the very similar
Very similar
things.
thing.
Similar things. I'm I don't really come across like people being competitive or anything. And I think it's because we kind of all know that this is
Right.
we're all trying to reach everybody. So
Yeah.
there
People are
has to
so
be different
supportive in the
personalities,
community.
and yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like we all need to be doing this to reach everybody,
Yeah.
different personalities, different styles, different tools, different, it's incredible. It
Yeah.
really is a
Yeah.
interesting
And I
time.
think maybe that's one way to sort of differentiate, especially if you come across somebody who's talking about things that are really scary, or advocating violence or things like
Hmm.
that, in the name of whatever, deity or non-physical thing.
Right.
That's kind of a tell,
Yeah.
because so many people that otherwise, and this includes people in religion and people that are sort of in the new age and metaphysical fields, that express nothing but like love and support and let's work together. I feel like that's
Hmm.
so backed by the love of the universe.
Yeah, it's
And
almost like a code.
it is like, and what a code. Love
Yeah, yeah,
everybody. I mean, it's a
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
simple code,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
you don't find competition. You don't find
Right.
people putting other people down, because
Right.
I'm like you, when I see somebody, and I also don't watch a lot of things like that are happening
Right.
that
Right.
I'm like
Right.
doing. But when I do run across somebody and I see something new, I'm so impressed. I mean, it's like so cool to see somebody who
Right.
you can feel um, sort of that they're in tune with that. And there's
Yeah.
so many great people right now.
Yeah. There,
So
there is. There really is. Yeah, exactly. A spoil of riches, or what is it called? Spoil of riches, or
yeah,
a,
that's
yeah, yeah.
spoiler
It's like,
riches. It
yeah,
is.
yeah. It
Yeah.
really is. Well, good. Well, I hope this was a helpful discussion, and I hope, please put comments. I know we both love to read the comments and see what people are
Because
thinking, and
people have great insights. They really do.
yeah,
Because a
yeah,
lot of people that we're talking to right now are hearing this, are are, well, everybody's intuitive, but a lot of
Mhm.
people do this sort of work too, and they have great insights. So,
Right, right, exactly.
yeah.
So, well, thanks, Kris. And so I guess I'll
Okay.
say goodbye from Intuitive View and